Democrats are still fighting to see President Trump's finances, and now the Trump Organization is fighting back. The organization is suing to block a subpoena to former Justice Department Deputy Director of Public Affairs under Trump, Ian Pryor, who says it's good he's standing up for himself. So, Ian, I'm looking here at the complaint or the suit. The first name is Donald Trump, the address 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We know that's the White House. But then you have the Trump Organization, the Trump Corporation, DJT Holdings, etc. You have all the business organizations. Is this a personal suit by the President of the United States or a corporate suit by the Trump entities?
I believe it's a combination, and I think that this entire subpoena by the House Oversight Committee is really just overreach. I mean, their job is to oversee how the government functions and to make sure it's functioning properly. Their job is not to go back and look at what, the president did at his corporation before he became president. If we start going down that path where the Oversight Committee can start looking into private corporations of politicians, and we have a politically motivated House of Representatives on either side doing that, we're really looking at some problems going forward.
Now, the president clearly feels energized and supported by the Mueller report, the decisions that came out of the Mueller report. I can't imagine him giving any ground now. If anything, he's going to fight back even harder.
And he should continue to fight back. I mean, look, obviously on the collusion conspiracy piece, it was complete exoneration. I think we can all agree that the obstruction of justice was a little more nuanced. But one of the things that I'm really disappointed about that I've seen in the coverage from most of the media is this idea that the Mueller report said that it's now up to Congress to make a decision on obstruction of justice. The Mueller report never said that. The Mueller report said that Mueller's team was able to investigate obstruction of justice because Congress had previously passed laws on obstruction of justice that would apply to everyone, even the president, and Mueller determined that there was no constitutional defense for the president to say, look, that doesn't apply to me because of my Article 2 power. There was nothing in Mueller's report saying that Congress should take this up under impeachment hearings or whatnot. Congress can do that if they want, but...
Yeah. Well, the point is that there was a lot of stuff in the Mueller report in the second part dealing with the obstruction case, whether there was one or wasn't, which a lot of people, a lot of legal scholars argue should not have been there. A prosecutor is not supposed to come out with stuff that he could possibly prosecute on but decided not to. You either do or don't.
Yeah, well, one thing to consider here is that report had been written for perhaps pretty long time, right? And Barr never had an obligation to put that in front of Congress or to make that public. That report was just supposed to go to the Attorney General. And at that time, when they started writing it, they didn't even know who the Attorney General was going to be. So the idea that they put that out there in public, we have to understand that the reason why this is out there in public in the first place is because Bill Barr committed to being increasingly transparent with this and to put it out for Congress and the public to see. There's nothing in the regulations that require that.
Well, the public is I think, getting pretty fed up with all these investigations, no matter who's behind them. Perhaps the Barr investigation, what started the Mueller report, is of interest because it's going to be done sort of behind the scenes by the Justice Department. But these public investigations, committee after committee coming out with things, notably Jerry Nadler's committee. Do you think that investigation fatigue is worrying some people at the top of the Democrat Party?
Well, it should. I mean, if they want to keep their majority longer than 2 years, they really need to tread lightly here. I heard Adam Schiff talk about how what President Trump did was worse than Nixon. Nixon fired the special prosecutor. Nixon authorized hush money. Nixon destroyed evidence. Bill Clinton lied under oath at a deposition at a grand jury and got Monica Lewinsky to lie in an affidavit under oath. How is anything that President Trump did here, where nothing actually happened, worse than what happened there? And if Democrats keep trying to sell that tall tale, it's going to be bad for their electoral prospects, and it's going to be, more importantly, bad for the country to continue to have to see this.
And Republicans, what about their investigations?
Well, look, the Inspector General is looking into the FISA application on Carter Page, which now we see, Carter Page wasn't implicated in this report. And I do think it's important to look at the origination of this investigation. We've heard different stories about when it became an investigation. Was it in July of 2016? Was it earlier? You have confidential informants going and talking to Trump campaign members. So probably before the investigation formally started. There's a lot here, obviously the dossier, that we need to look at because we need to make sure that this does not happen again. And maybe there is no illegalities there. Maybe it's regulations being violated.
As we get into an
an
election, I think people want to focus on the issues that concern them specifically. Ian, thank you very much. Good to see you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.